guys, welcome back to a new video. So today I wanted to do my first impressions of Fear the Walking Dead Season 8 Episode 4, Kings County. Now, this episode I actually really enjoyed. I did enjoy it. I wasn't fully engaged the whole way through. It's an episode focused on Morgan and focused on the Walking Dead, like his past there. It really is the complete opposite of what I want to watch when I'm watching Fear the Walking Dead. But considering all of that, I actually really like the episode. But I want to talk about my negatives first because I want to get them out of the way with and end on the positives because I do believe that it deserves to end on the positives. But there are quite a few negatives that I have that don't necessarily fall within the episode itself, but more to do with what the show has kind of said in the past and how it either contradicts itself or makes itself a little confusing. And I could be wrong with some of these points, but this is just what I've gathered. And there's about 3 or 4 things. So the first one is radiation in the cure. Now look, it's to do with Grace, and it's confusing. I'm not 100% sure what was meant with the cure and radiation. I know that radiation stops the infection, and I know that some of the early tests we learned from episode 2, the patient died because of radiation, because they had too much of it. And we all kind of gathered with Alicia. She was alive. She had radiation before and afterwards. She wasn't dealt too much radiation. And then Finch, with more understanding, I think that Finch got the right dose of radiation afterwards, I believe. But Grace, in this episode, it had been said that Grace was going to die because the radiation was finally catching up with her and she was getting ill because of it. Fair enough. It was expected that, Grace had 2 separate occasions in 2 different seasons where she had been, dealt way too much radiation than what she should have, season 5 and season 7. And so, with Grace kind of getting bit, everyone seemed to be worried about it, but I was a little bit confused that if Grace was, bitten, but she had already had so much radiation, she'd already been dealt with so much radiation, I'm not too sure what everyone was so worried about, because wouldn't that mean that Grace, she would have so much radiation that the infection would stop? And, that's just what I'm a little bit confused about, because Alicia, or not Alicia, but Finch didn't have any radiation beforehand, but he had it afterwards. See, look, I'm getting confused in what I'm going to say, so I'm going to stop talking about this. But can you see my point? Can you see why I'm a little bit confused on what they're going to do with Grace? And obviously, maybe they're saying that you need the radiation afterwards, which Alicia did get radiation afterwards, but she also got it beforehand, whereas Finch was just afterwards, after he'd been bitten. But then people died afterwards because they had too much radiation. But then they're learning the right. Do you see what I mean? Do you see why Grace getting bit, especially Grace, is a really big, weird thing? And of course, what I think and I'm predicting that's going to happen is that Grace is going to need to get more radiation, and that's going to just end up killing her. Grace is going to die very soon, whether she gets more radiation and she gets killed because of the radiation, or whether she just doesn't get the radiation and dies because of the infection. But like I say, based off what we already know, Grace probably shouldn't need any treatment. And maybe it'll be oh yeah, we were worried, we thought she needed treatment, but we forgot, I didn't realise that Grace and the treatment, she didn't need any. That's just one thing that I'm very confused about. Really want to know the answers to. And again, I didn't look at what's happening in the next episode, so I can't tell you whether there was anything that they showed about it. I just saw the very start where they were on the boat and they were they're catching up with us or something. I turned it off straight away. So if any of this was explained, then they are. Morgan killing. So at the end of the episode, Morgan killed 2 people, which was really cool. But I had to sit back and think, well, didn't Morgan kill the bounty hunter in season 6? And recently, I rewatched that episode and did a video on the highest rated episode. And obviously, Morgan killed the bounty hunter in that episode. And Morgan never killed anyone after that. So I can't sit there and say, yes, Morgan's clear. Because really, we already thought that he was somewhat clear in season 6. And he wouldn't even kill Virginia. So, look, that was really cool for the episode. What possibly might happen, but at the moment, I really am going into it a little bit speculative. I can't sit there and say that Morgan will be dead cool. Morgan's view on Padre, that is something else that I'm a little bit confused about, because episode 1, he was definitely hellbent on Padre, but then episode 3, I was confused on whether after his like little moment with Madison, whether he was going to run off to actually fight Padre. But then episode 4 at times, this recent episode, was a bit like, did Morgan want to be with Padre? Did he not want to be with Padre? Would he have gone back? And throughout the episode, by the end of episode 4, it was quite clear that Morgan is now against Padre. But I wasn't sure if at the start of the episode he was or wasn't. Like, I'm a little bit confused on Morgan's view on Padre. Again, I know maybe it's me, maybe these are kind of my things, but it's not to if I'm getting confused about it, it's clearly not that simple. Morgan's view on Padre is not simple, and I know that you don't have to make a simplistic view on something like, yes, they like them, yes, they don't like them, but it's confusing because it's Morgan. And the last thing I want to mention, and I know I can already see that nearly 6 minutes into this, and I've just been negatives, but again, these are things that I have problems with, or at least I'm a little bit confused about. But Morgan, this episode, this is a bit of a positive to be fair, because I actually believe that Morgan, this episode, was justified in acting the way he was, because I always complain about Morgan, the way he acts, and I think he was justified in this episode. However, I also have to sit here and say that what's new? Morgan's acted this way for so long. Like, this is no different to a possible season 5, season 6 episode, maybe season 5, season 7. I don't know. Like, this is how Morgan acts all the time. So even if I can sit there and say, yeah, it's right that Morgan's like this because he's definitely worried, he's definitely stressed out, and this is definitely a hard situation for anyone. But Morgan does this every other day that I'm not gonna. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel bad for him because this is the way that he acts every episode. I have like this much sympathy through him. Usually I have this. That's nothing. There's nothing there. But I actually did have that much sympathy for him today. But let it not go unheard that that's normal for Morgan to act this way. And if the show had just put Morgan as a stronger person, then maybe I would have actually had like this much sympathy through him and been like, Morgan, absolutely, I feel so bad for you. But clearly, he's just been a big child. And there is nothing wrong with an adult man or female or an adult character feeling stressed out and being the way Morgan has been. But just know that now Morgan is acting this way, it doesn't feel any different to a usual episode. They're the negatives. I know I was being really harsh because it just contradicts itself. It's not simple. Like, Morgan's been this way before. He's killed people and reverted straight back, He acts this way all the time. The radiation's a little bit confusing. Morgan's view on Padre is also confusing. Like, it's all just a little bit confusing. But in terms of the episode itself, I really did enjoy it. I thought it was an emotional episode, and I was a little bit sad. I wasn't, crying, I wasn't distraught, but at some points I was a bit like when we found out Grace was dying, I was kind of a bit sad, and I don't like Grace, but I actually didn't mind this episode. I thought the acting was really good as well, especially with an emotional episode. You got to have them high emotions, them high kind of feelings, and I thought that they were shown. I thought that Lenny James was great. I really, really did like him. As much as in a moment I might hate Morgan, I also look at Lenny James and I think, it's just so good. I thought that Zoe Merchant did a good job. I thought Karen David did a good job. Grace and Mo, I thought they did really good job as this weird dynamic family that kind of loved each other and wanted to learn and wanted to get out of Padre and understand what was going on. So I thought the acting was good. I liked the references as well. I don't usually like Walking Dead references in Fear the Walking Dead because that's not what I'm here for when I'm watching Fear the Walking Dead. But I did like the Rick Grimes reference and how they used the gun. I did like the Negan reference in Santry. And even the Virginia reference because, again, in my video about the highest rated episode... I did a video about what was good about the new reboot, the rebooted era Fear, and the villains was one of my points, and Virginia was one of the villains that I thought was good, and so I did like how they referenced her and kind of connected the seasons with a Fear within themselves, just little bit nicer. They're putting a good part of the rebooted Fear with another good part, and it kind of does strengthen my view on that. There wasn't really anything else. I know I did enjoy the episode more, I really did, and I did. Probably this episode was 80% negatives, but if they can get explained, flattened out, Morgan can prove himself within this season, then you'll look back at this and think, yeah, well, he was complaining at the time, but they really did do a job to fix all these misconceptions and problems that I have. And again, like I said, the acting, the episode itself was good. I thought it was engaging. I thought using Dwight and Sherry as well. It wasn't just like Morgan, if he decided to, could just kill the people that are after him, because it was Dwight and Sherry, and they had their own child to think about. And in some way, like us as a viewer, were like, what, do we want to side with Morgan? Or do we want to side with Dwight and Sherry? And eventually, it was all right. Everyone's clearly on the boat trying to save Grace, if that's possible or whatever. But I did like another emphasis on Finch, because it's nice to see Dwight and Sherry's son as well, because obviously that was a big contention in season 7 near the end. But I did enjoy this episode. I would give it a 7.5 to 8 out of 10. I think it just sadly is let down by the show itself. But I thought it was good. I would watch it again. I enjoyed the references, and I had a good time watching it. And considering that I went into it thinking, like, oh, you know, I'm not going to enjoy this episode, I really did have a good time with it. So thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.